Marcus Thompson had been working as a royal security guard for 12 years. He started when he was just 25 years old, fresh out of military service with dreams of protecting the most important family in Britain. Now at 37, he stood at his usual post outside Kensington Palace, watching the morning joggers pass by on the tree-lined paths. The early October air was crisp, and Marcus pulled his black jacket tighter around his shoulders. He had always loved this time of year at the palace. The leaves were turning golden, and there was something peaceful about the quiet moments before the royal family began their daily activities. But today felt different. There was a heaviness in his chest that he couldn't shake off. Marcus thought about his own family as he stood there. His wife Sarah was probably getting their 2 children ready for school right now. 8-year-old Emma would be complaining about her math homework, while 10-year-old James would be looking for his football boots. Marcus smiled slightly at the thought, but the smile faded quickly when he remembered the conversation he'd had with Sarah the night before. Money was tight. It had been tight for months now. Even with his steady job at the palace, the bills kept piling up. Sarah's part-time job at the local library wasn't bringing in enough to cover everything they needed. Emma needed new school shoes. James wanted to join the school's football team, which required expensive equipment, and their car had been making strange noises that probably meant a costly repair was coming. The worst part was that Marcus felt like he was failing his family. He worked long hours, sometimes staying late when there were special events or increased security needs. He missed dinner with his children more often than he liked, and he could see the worry in Sarah's eyes when she thought he wasn't looking. She never complained, but he knew she was scared about their financial situation. As Marcus stood at his post, he watched a black car pull up to the palace gates. He recognized it immediately as one of the royal vehicles. Through the tinted windows, he caught a glimpse of young Prince George in the back seat, probably returning from a morning appointment or lesson. The 10-year-old prince looked out the window as the car passed, and for a moment their eyes met. Prince George gave a small wave, and Marcus nodded respectfully in return. This simple interaction reminded Marcus of why he had wanted this job in the first place. He remembered the pride he felt when he first put on his uniform, knowing that he was part of something bigger than himself. He was protecting not just individuals, but an institution that represented centuries of British history and tradition. The royal family trusted him with their safety, and that trust meant everything to him. But lately, that pride had been overshadowed by worry and stress. Every month, when he received his paycheck, he would calculate and recalculate their expenses, trying to figure out how to make the money stretch just a little bit further. He had started looking at other job opportunities in his spare time, even though the thought of leaving the palace made his heart ache. The irony wasn't lost on him. Here he was, working in one of the most prestigious positions in the country, protecting one of the wealthiest families in the world, and yet he couldn't afford to give his own children the things they needed. He felt guilty for even thinking about it, but sometimes he wondered what it would be like to not worry about money every single day. Marcus had always been a proud man. He came from a working-class family where his father had taught him the value of hard work and determination. His father had worked in a factory for 40 years, never complaining, always providing for his family despite the modest income. Marcus had hoped to do better for his own children, to give them opportunities his parents couldn't afford to give him. The morning passed slowly, with Marcus lost in his thoughts. He performed his duties automatically, checking identification, monitoring the perimeter, and staying alert for any potential security threats. But his mind kept drifting back to his family's situation. He thought about Emma's disappointed face when he told her they couldn't afford the art supplies she wanted for her school project. He remembered James asking why they couldn't go on holiday like his friends' families did. Around midday, Marcus noticed increased activity around the palace. Staff members were moving with more purpose, and there seemed to be preparations for something. He learned from his supervisor that there would be a small private event later in the afternoon. Nothing too formal, but it would require extra attention from the security team. As the afternoon approached, Marcus felt the familiar mix of professionalism and anticipation that came with these events. Despite his personal struggles, he still took pride in his work. He straightened his shoulders, checked his equipment one more time, and prepared to focus completely on his duties. Whatever was happening in his personal life, he would never let it affect his performance as a guard. The palace grounds were beautifully maintained. And on days like this, Marcus could understand why people from all over the world came to see this place. The history, the tradition, the sense of continuity that the royal family represented, it was all real and meaningful. But as he stood there preparing for another afternoon of service, Marcus couldn't help but wonder how much longer he could continue to serve others while struggling to serve his own family's needs. The weight of his financial worries felt heavier with each passing day, and Marcus knew that soon he would have to make some difficult decisions. He just hoped that when the time came, he would have the courage to do what was right for his family, even if it meant saying goodbye to the job that had defined so much of his adult life. The afternoon event was smaller than Marcus had expected. It was a private gathering in one of the palace's gardens, where Prince George was meeting with a group of children from a local charity. The children, all around the same age as the young prince, had been invited to spend the afternoon learning about gardening and environmental conservation. Marcus positioned himself at a discreet distance, close enough to respond quickly if needed, but far enough away to give the children their privacy. He watched as Prince George, dressed in casual clothes and Wellington boots, enthusiastically showed the visiting children how to plant seedlings in small pots. The prince's genuine excitement was infectious, and soon all the children were laughing and chatting as they worked with the soil. What struck Marcus most was how natural Prince George seemed with the other children. Despite his royal status and the privileges that came with it, the 10-year-old boy was just like any other child when he was playing and learning. He got his hands dirty, made mistakes with the planting, and shared jokes with his new friends. There was no pretense or formality, just a young boy enjoying himself. During a quiet moment, Marcus noticed one of the visiting children, a girl about Emma's age, sitting apart from the group. She looked sad and wasn't participating in the activities. Prince George must have noticed too, because Marcus watched as the young prince walked over to her and sat down beside her on a small garden bench. Marcus couldn't hear their conversation from where he stood, but he could see Prince George talking gently to the girl. The prince pointed to different flowers in the garden, and gradually the girl began to smile. Soon Prince George had convinced her to join the planting activity, and Marcus watched as the prince patiently helped her with her seedling, encouraging her every step of the way. This simple act of kindness reminded Marcus of his own children. Emma was sometimes shy in new situations, just like that little girl had been. James was naturally outgoing, but he also had a gentle side when someone needed help or comfort. Watching Prince George's natural compassion made Marcus think about the values he was trying to teach his own children. As the afternoon continued, Marcus found himself thinking more about the differences between his world and the world he was protecting. The children from the charity would go home to families who were probably struggling financially, just like his own family. They might not have all the toys they wanted or be able to go on expensive holidays, but here they were, being treated with the same respect and kindness that any child deserved. The contrast wasn't lost on Marcus. Prince George would never have to worry about money the way Marcus worried about it. The young prince would never have to choose between buying school supplies and paying the electric bill. He would never have to disappoint his children because the family budget was too tight. Yet here was this privileged child showing genuine care and concern for others who had much less. After the gardening activity, the children moved to another part of the garden where they were served afternoon tea. Marcus watched as Prince George made sure every child had enough to eat and drink. When one boy spilled juice on his shirt, the prince quickly found a napkin and helped clean it up, reassuring the embarrassed child that accidents happen to everyone. During the tea time, Marcus overheard fragments of conversations. The charity children were talking about their schools, their families, and their dreams for the future. Some wanted to be teachers, others wanted to be doctors or firefighters. Their aspirations were simple but heartfelt, and Prince George listened to each one with genuine interest. One girl mentioned that she wanted to be a gardener when she grew up, inspired by the afternoon's activities. Prince George's face lit up, and he began telling her about all the different types of plants in the palace gardens. He promised to send her some seeds so she could start her own garden at home. The girl's excitement was pure joy, and Marcus felt a warmth in his chest watching this exchange. As the event began to wind down, Marcus noticed Prince George talking quietly with one of the charity organizers. The prince was asking detailed questions about the children's backgrounds and what kind of support the charity provided. His questions weren't casual curiosity. They showed a genuine desire to understand and help. The organizer explained that many of the children came from single-parent families where money was very tight. Some were being raised by grandparents because their parents couldn't take care of them. Others had parents who worked multiple jobs just to make ends meet. Marcus felt a familiar pang in his chest as he listened to these descriptions. While his situation wasn't as dire as some of these families, he understood the stress and worry that came with financial uncertainty. What happened next surprised Marcus completely. Prince George asked the organizer if there was a way for him to stay in touch with the charity, and perhaps do more events like this one. The 10-year-old prince wasn't just going through the motions of a royal duty. He was genuinely moved by what he had learned about these children's lives. As the afternoon came to an end, Marcus helped coordinate the departure of the charity group. Each child was given a small pot with their planted seedling to take home, along with instructions for care. Prince George personally said goodbye to each child, remembering their names and something specific about their conversation during the afternoon. The last child to leave was the shy girl who had been sitting alone at the beginning. She approached Prince George hesitantly and whispered something in his ear. The prince smiled and whispered something back, and then the girl gave him a quick hug before running to catch up with her group. After all the children had left, Marcus remained at his post as Prince George and the palace staff cleaned up the garden area. The prince insisted on helping with the cleanup, refusing to simply walk away and let others handle the work. He carefully collected the gardening tools and made sure all the plant debris was properly disposed of. As Marcus watched the young prince work, he felt a complex mix of emotions. There was admiration for the child's character and genuine kindness. There was also a deeper sadness about the inequalities in the world that allowed some children to have everything they could ever want, while others had to struggle for basic necessities. But most of all, Marcus felt a growing sense of conflict about his own situation. Here was a 10-year-old boy who had shown more genuine concern for others' welfare in one afternoon than Marcus had seen from many adults. It made Marcus wonder what example he was setting for his own children, and whether his financial struggles were teaching them the right lessons about life and priorities. The days following the charity event were difficult for Marcus. He couldn't stop thinking about what he had witnessed, and the contrast between Prince George's generosity and his own family's struggles became more painful with each passing day. That evening after the garden event, he had gone home to find Emma crying over her homework because she didn't have the proper colored pencils her teacher had requested. James was disappointed because Marcus had to tell him once again that they couldn't afford the football team registration fees. Sarah tried to comfort the children, explaining that money was tight but that things would get better soon. But Marcus could see the strain in her eyes, the way her shoulders sagged when she thought no one was looking. She had been working extra hours at the library, staying late to help with inventory and special programs, but it still wasn't enough to cover their mounting expenses. Marcus lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling and listening to Sarah's steady breathing beside him. He thought about the joy on those charity children's faces when Prince George had paid attention to them, really listened to their dreams and concerns. He thought about his own children, who were just as deserving of attention and care, but who were learning that wanting things meant disappointment because Daddy couldn't provide them. The next morning at work, Marcus tried to focus on his duties, but his mind kept wandering. During his lunch break, he sat alone in the staff room and pulled out his phone to look at job listings again. Security positions at private companies, bank security, even night shift work at warehouses. Anything that might pay more than his current salary. But every job he found either required him to relocate his family, or would mean even longer hours away from Emma and James. Later that afternoon, Marcus was assigned to patrol the inner courtyard when he spotted Prince George walking with his tutor toward one of the palace's smaller buildings. The young prince was carrying a notebook and seemed deep in thought about something. As they passed near Marcus's position, he heard Prince George asking his tutor about the charity from the previous day. "Mr. Harrison," Prince George said to his tutor, "do you think we could invite those children back again soon? I've been thinking about what the lady said about their families needing help." The tutor, an elderly man with kind eyes, smiled at his young student. "That's very thoughtful of you, Your Highness. What kind of help were you thinking about?" Prince George stopped walking and looked up at his tutor seriously. Well, some of them said their parents work very hard but still don't have enough money for things like school supplies and sports equipment. I have so many things I don't even use. Couldn't we share some of them? Marcus felt his chest tighten as he listened to this conversation. Here was a 10-year-old boy recognizing the same problems that kept Marcus awake at night. And the child was already thinking of solutions while Marcus felt helpless. That's a wonderful idea, the tutor replied. Perhaps we could organize a program where you could donate some of your unused items to children who need them. We could also look into ways the royal family might support the charity's educational programs. Prince George's face brightened with excitement. Could we really do that? I have books I've already read, games I don't play with anymore, and clothes that don't fit me. And maybe we could ask the kitchen staff to pack extra meals sometimes. Marcus had to step away from where he was standing, because the conversation was becoming too emotional for him to handle while on duty. He moved to a different section of his patrol route, but Prince George's words echoed in his mind. The young prince was thinking about sharing his meals, his books, his clothes, things that Marcus couldn't even afford to buy for his own children in the first place. That evening, Marcus came home to find Sarah sitting at the kitchen table with bills spread out in front of her. Her calculator was nearby, and she had that familiar, worried expression that had become too common in their household. Emma and James were in the living room, doing homework and trying to share a single set of colored pencils between them. "How bad is it this month?" Marcus asked quietly, sitting down beside his wife. Sarah looked up at him with tired eyes. "We're going to be short on the mortgage payment again. I can call the bank and arrange another extension, but Marcus, we can't keep doing this. The late fees are adding up, and they're only going to be patient for so long." Marcus felt the familiar knot of anxiety form in his stomach. What if I picked up some weekend security work? There are always events that need extra guards. You're already working 6 days a week, Sarah replied, reaching over to touch his hand. When would you sleep? When would you see the children? We need to find a real solution, not just more ways for you to exhaust yourself. That night, after the children were asleep, Marcus and Sarah had a long conversation about their options. They talked about selling their house and moving to a smaller place, but property values in their area weren't good for sellers. They discussed Sarah working full-time, but childcare costs would eat up most of her additional income. Every solution they considered seemed to create new problems. The next day at work, Marcus was more distracted than usual. During his morning briefing, his supervisor had to repeat instructions twice because Marcus's mind was elsewhere. He felt ashamed of his lack of focus, but the weight of his family's problems was becoming harder to carry while maintaining his professional demeanor. Around midday, Marcus was stationed near the main entrance when he saw Prince George approaching with his protection officer. The young prince was carrying a large box, and Marcus could hear him talking enthusiastically about something. As they got closer, Marcus realized that Prince George was carrying donations, toys, books, and clothes that he had gathered to give to the charity children. "I found so many things," Prince George was saying to his protection officer. "These books are really good, and someone else should get to enjoy them. And look at this puzzle. I only did it once, but another child could do it lots of times." The protection officer smiled patiently. "That's very generous of you, Your Highness. I'm sure the children will appreciate these gifts very much." Marcus watched this scene unfold, and something inside him broke a little bit more. Here was this young prince, freely giving away things that Marcus's children would treasure, while Marcus stood there in his uniform, protecting a family that had abundance beyond imagination, unable to provide basic necessities for his own family. As Prince George walked past Marcus's position, the young prince looked up and gave him the same respectful nod he always did. But this time, Marcus felt like a fraud accepting that gesture of acknowledgement. How could he stand there representing protection and service when he couldn't even protect his own family from financial hardship? The afternoon dragged on slowly, and Marcus found himself questioning everything about his life choices. He had always believed that hard work and dedication would be enough to provide for his family. He had always thought that having a job with honor and prestige would somehow translate into financial security. But the reality was that honor didn't pay the bills, and prestige didn't put food on the table or shoes on his children's feet. 3 weeks had passed since the charity event, and Marcus's situation at home had grown worse. The mortgage company had called twice about late payments, and the electricity bill was overdue. Sarah had started working additional shifts at the library, which meant Marcus was responsible for getting the children ready for school on his days off. The stress was showing on everyone in the family. Emma had stopped asking for things she needed for school, which broke Marcus's heart more than her previous requests ever had. James had become quieter, spending more time in his room reading library books instead of playing outside with friends. Both children seemed to understand that money was a problem, even though Marcus and Sarah tried to shield them from the worst of their financial worries. On this particular Thursday morning, Marcus was assigned to a post near the palace's private family areas. It was unusual for him to be in this section, but several regular guards were sick with flu, and staffing was thin. He stood at attention near a corridor that led to the family's informal sitting rooms, a place where the royals could relax away from the formal protocol of their public duties. Around 10 in the morning, Marcus heard voices approaching from around the corner. He recognized Prince George's voice immediately, along with what sounded like his mother, Princess Catherine. They were having a conversation as they walked, and their voices carried clearly in the quiet hallway. "Mummy, I've been thinking about the children from the charity visit," Prince George was saying. "Mrs. Williams told me that some of their parents work very important jobs but still don't have enough money to buy everything their families need." "That's true." "Darling," Princess Catherine replied gently, "there are many people who work very hard but still struggle to make ends meet. It's one of the reasons why we try to support charities that help families in need." Marcus felt his face flush with embarrassment. He was standing there, literally representing the people they were discussing. Someone who worked an important job but couldn't adequately provide for his family. The irony of his situation felt overwhelming in that moment. "But I don't understand," Prince George continued as they came into view, walking slowly down the hallway. "If someone has a job protecting important people or teaching children or helping sick people, shouldn't that be worth enough money to take care of their own families?" Princess Catherine paused in their walk, considering her son's question carefully. "You're asking very thoughtful questions, George. The truth is that many jobs that are very important to society don't always pay as much as they should. Sometimes people choose careers because they want to help others, even if it means they won't make as much money as they could in other jobs." Marcus tried to remain professional and invisible, but he couldn't help but listen to every word of this conversation. Prince George was articulating the exact frustration that Marcus felt every day, the unfairness of working in a job that served others while struggling to serve his own family's needs, like the policemen who keep people safe, Prince George said thoughtfully, "and the teachers at my school, and the people who work here at the palace protecting us." Marcus's heart skipped a beat. Prince George was specifically mentioning people like him, palace security guards who dedicated their lives to protecting the royal family. "Yes, exactly like those people," Princess Catherine confirmed. "Many of them choose their jobs because they believe in the work they're doing, not because of the money they'll earn. But that doesn't make their struggles any less real or important." They had stopped walking now, standing just a few feet away from where Marcus was stationed. He kept his eyes forward, maintaining his professional posture, but every word of their conversation felt like it was meant for him to hear. "I wish there was something we could do to help them," Prince George said quietly. "It doesn't seem fair that someone who takes care of our family might not be able to take care of their own family properly." Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. This 10-year-old boy was showing more understanding and compassion for his situation than Marcus sometimes felt for himself. The young prince recognized the sacrifice that people like Marcus made every day, choosing duty and service over financial gain. "Well," Princess Catherine said thoughtfully, "perhaps there are ways we could learn more about the people who work here and see if there are things we could do to support them better. What do you think about that idea?" "I would like that very much," Prince George replied earnestly. "Could we maybe talk to some of them? Not in a formal way, but just to understand their lives better?" At that moment, Princess Catherine looked directly at Marcus, acknowledging his presence with a kind smile. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson," she said warmly. "I hope you're having a pleasant day." "Good morning, Your Royal Highness," Marcus replied with a respectful bow of his head. "Thank you, ma'am." Prince George looked up at Marcus with curious, intelligent eyes. "Mr. Thompson, do you have children?" The question caught Marcus off guard. It was unusual for members of the royal family to engage in personal conversation with the guards, though it wasn't forbidden. "Yes, Your Highness. I have 2 children, a daughter and a son. How old are they?" Prince George asked with genuine interest. "My daughter Emma is 8, and my son James is 10, Marcus replied, trying to keep his voice steady despite the emotional weight of the earlier conversation he'd overheard. "The same age as me," Prince George exclaimed with a smile. "Does your son like football?" "I love football." Marcus couldn't help but smile slightly. "Yes, Your Highness, James loves football very much. He watches every match he can." Princess Catherine watched this exchange with interest, and Marcus could see something thoughtful in her expression. She seemed to be truly listening, not just being polite. "Does he play on a team?" Prince George continued his questions. This was the question Marcus had been dreading. "Not currently, Your Highness, but he hopes to join his school team someday." Marcus didn't mention that James couldn't join the team because they couldn't afford the registration fees and equipment. He didn't want to burden a child with knowledge of financial struggles, even if that child was a prince who had just been discussing those very issues. But Prince George seemed to sense there was more to the story. The young prince looked up at his mother, then back at Marcus with a thoughtful expression that seemed far too mature for his 10 years. "Well, I hope he gets to join the team soon," Prince George said sincerely. "Maybe someday we could kick a football together. I don't get to play with many other children my age." The innocence and genuine kindness in Prince George's voice nearly broke Marcus's composure. Here was this privileged child, who could have anything he wanted, expressing a desire to play with Marcus's son, a boy who couldn't even afford to join his school team. That would be wonderful. "Your Highness," Marcus managed to say, though his voice was thicker with emotion than he intended. After Princess Catherine and Prince George continued on their way, Marcus remained at his post, but his mind was reeling from the conversation. The young prince's compassion and understanding had touched something deep inside him, but it had also made his own situation feel even more impossible to bear. The weekend following his conversation with Prince George brought Marcus to his breaking point. On Saturday morning, Emma's school shoes finally gave out completely. The sole separated from the upper part, making them unwearable. Sarah had been trying to delay this expense for weeks, using tape and glue to extend their life, but there was no more postponing the inevitable. Marcus sat at the kitchen table with his head in his hands as Sarah showed him the broken shoes. "I've looked at every discount store in town," she said quietly. "The cheapest decent pair I can find is £40, and that's on sale." £40. Marcus knew exactly how much money was in their account, and it wasn't enough to cover new shoes and still pay for groceries for the week. He felt like he was drowning in his inability to provide something as basic as shoes for his 8-year-old daughter. "I can ask my mother for help," Sarah suggested hesitantly. "She might be able to lend us something until your next paycheck." Marcus's pride rebelled against this idea. He was a grown man, a professional who protected one of the most important families in the country, and he couldn't buy shoes for his own child without borrowing money from his mother-in-law. The shame felt unbearable. "Let me think about it," he said, though they both knew they didn't have much time to think. Emma needed shoes for school on Monday. That afternoon, while Sarah took the children to the library for free entertainment, Marcus walked around their neighborhood, thinking about his options. He passed other families enjoying their weekend, children playing in parks wearing expensive trainers, families loading shopping bags into nice cars, fathers who seemed relaxed and happy instead of constantly worried about money. Marcus found himself at a small cafe where he sometimes bought coffee on special occasions. He sat on a bench outside watching people come and go, and realized he felt completely disconnected from this normal world of people who could afford small luxuries like coffee and pastries without calculating the impact on their weekly budget. His phone buzzed with a text message from Sarah. "Emma's asking about her shoes for Monday. What should I tell her?" Marcus stared at the message for a long time before responding. "Tell her we'll figure something out." But he had no idea what they would figure out. His credit cards were already maxed out from previous emergencies. He had no savings left to draw from. His parents lived on a fixed pension and couldn't help even if he was willing to ask them. The only option seemed to be swallowing his pride and accepting help from Sarah's family. But even that felt like admitting defeat as a husband and father. On Sunday evening, Marcus made a decision that felt both necessary and heartbreaking. He would ask his supervisor about taking on additional duties or overtime shifts, even if it meant even less time with his family. He would also seriously start applying for higher-paying jobs, even if it meant leaving the position he had worked so hard to achieve. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching Marcus's mood as he prepared for work. Sarah had managed to borrow money from her sister for Emma's shoes, but the debt added another layer of stress to their already strained finances. Emma was happy to have proper shoes again, but Marcus felt the weight of his failure to provide for her without help from others. At work, Marcus requested a meeting with his supervisor during his lunch break. He had decided to ask about overtime opportunities and to start the process of exploring other employment options. The conversation was difficult, but his supervisor was understanding and promised to look into additional shifts that might be available. That afternoon, Marcus was assigned to a routine patrol of the Palace Gardens. It was a quiet Monday with no special events or visitors scheduled. As he walked his assigned route, Marcus tried to clear his mind and focus on his duties, but the financial pressure felt like a constant weight on his shoulders. Around 3 o'clock, Marcus was near the same garden area where the charity event had taken place when he heard familiar voices. Prince George was walking with his tutor again, but this time they weren't alone. The young prince was carrying what looked like a small package, and he seemed excited about something. "Are you sure this is appropriate, Your Highness?" the tutor was asking gently. "I think it's the right thing to do," Prince George replied with determination. "Mummy said that when we see people struggling, we should try to help if we can. And I've been thinking about what Mr. Thompson said about his son." Marcus's attention immediately focused on their conversation. They were talking about him and James. He felt a mix of curiosity and concern about what Prince George had been thinking. "But we should probably speak with the princess about this first," the tutor suggested. "I already did," Prince George said confidently. "She said that showing kindness to people who work hard to take care of our family is exactly what we should do. She helped me put this together." Marcus watched as they approached the area where he was standing. Prince George looked up at him with a bright smile, and Marcus felt his stomach tighten with anxiety about what was coming. "Good afternoon, Mr. Thompson," Prince George said politely. "I hope you don't mind, but I wanted to give you something." Marcus felt completely unprepared for this interaction. "Your Highness, that's very kind, but I couldn't accept any gifts." "It's not really for you," Prince George explained, holding out the package. "It's for James. You said he loves football, and I thought he might like these." Marcus looked down at the package, unsure of what to do. The young prince's gesture was clearly well-intentioned, but accepting gifts from the royal family felt complicated and potentially inappropriate. "Your Highness, I'm very grateful for your thoughtfulness, but I'm not sure I should accept this," Marcus said carefully. Prince George's face fell slightly, but he persisted. "Please, Mr. Thompson, I know that working here means you take care of our family, but that shouldn't mean you can't take care of your own family too. Mummy explained to me that sometimes good people have hard times, and helping each other is what makes us all better." The sincerity and wisdom in the 10-year-old's words struck Marcus deeply. Here was this child, trying to teach him about accepting help and kindness. Marcus realized that his pride might be preventing him from receiving something that was offered with pure intentions. "May I ask what it is, Your Highness?" Marcus asked quietly. Prince George's smile returned. "It's a football kit, jersey, shorts, and boots. I grew out of them, but they're still really good. I thought maybe James could use them for his school team." Marcus felt his throat close with emotion. The exact items that James needed to join the football team, the things Marcus couldn't afford to buy, were being offered freely by this thoughtful child. The generosity of the gesture and the understanding it showed of Marcus's situation was overwhelming. Marcus stood there holding the package from Prince George, feeling more conflicted than he had ever felt in his life. The weight of the football kit in his hands represented so much more than just sports equipment. It was everything he wanted to provide for James but couldn't afford, offered freely by a child who barely knew them. "Your Highness," Marcus began, his voice thick with emotion, "this is incredibly generous, but I need to think about whether it's appropriate for me to accept this." Prince George looked up at him with those intelligent 10-year-old eyes. "Mr. Thompson, can I tell you something my grandmother taught me? She said that refusing kindness is sometimes just another form of selfishness, because it takes away the joy that comes from helping others." The wisdom of those words, coming from such a young person, hit Marcus like a physical blow. He realized that his pride, his need to be the provider, the protector, the one who never needed help, might be hurting not just his own family, but also preventing others from experiencing the happiness that comes from giving. "James will love this," Marcus said quietly, accepting the gift with a deep bow of his head. "Thank you, Your Highness. Thank you more than I can express." Prince George beamed with happiness. "Will you tell him it's from a friend who hopes he gets to play lots of football?" "I will tell him exactly that," Marcus promised. That evening, Marcus sat in his car outside his house for a long time before going inside. The football kit sat on the passenger seat, and he kept looking at it, thinking about what it represented. He thought about Prince George's words about refusing kindness being selfish. He thought about his own children, and how his pride had been preventing him from accepting help that could make their lives better. When he finally went inside, Marcus found Sarah helping Emma with homework while James read in the corner. The sight of his family, struggling but still loving and supporting each other, made his decision clear. "James," Marcus called softly, "can you come here for a minute?" His son looked up from his book and walked over curiously. Marcus picked up the package and handed it to him. "A friend wanted you to have this," Marcus said, remembering Prince George's exact words. "He heard that you love football and hoped you might be able to use these." James opened the package carefully, his eyes growing wide as he saw the professional quality football kit inside. The jersey was beautiful, the shorts were the perfect size, and the boots looked expensive and barely worn. "Dad, this is amazing," James exclaimed. "But who gave it to me? How did they know I needed football kit?" Marcus felt tears prick his eyes as he watched his son's joy. Someone who understands that good people sometimes need help, and that helping each other makes everyone stronger. Sarah looked up from Emma's homework, saw the football kit, and understood immediately that something significant had happened. She walked over and put her hand on Marcus's shoulder, a gesture of support and love that spoke volumes. That night, after the children were asleep, Marcus told Sarah the whole story. He talked about Prince George's kindness, about the conversations he had overheard, about his own struggles with pride and the fear of being seen as unable to provide for his family. "I've been thinking," Marcus said as they sat together on their small sofa, "maybe it's time I stopped being so proud and started being more practical. There are programs that help families like ours, resources we haven't explored because I've been too stubborn to admit we need help." Sarah took his hand. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking about talking to someone about financial counseling, looking into assistance programs for families, maybe even considering that job with the private security company that pays more, even if it means leaving the palace." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "Would you be happy leaving your job there?" Marcus considered this carefully. "I thought my job was about protecting and serving the royal family. But today I learned that sometimes the most important thing you can do is accept help, so that you can be the best version of yourself for the people who matter most. If taking a different job means I can provide better for you and the children, then yes, I think I could be happy with that choice." Over the next few weeks, Marcus began making changes in his life. He met with a financial counselor who helped him understand better ways to manage their budget and explore assistance programs they qualified for. He applied for the higher-paying security job and was offered the position within days of his interview. But the most significant change was in Marcus's attitude toward asking for and accepting help. He learned that his worth as a husband and father wasn't measured only by his ability to provide everything on his own, but also by his willingness to do whatever was necessary to ensure his family's well-being. The day Marcus submitted his resignation to his supervisor at the palace, he felt a complex mix of emotions. There was sadness at leaving a job he had loved and been proud of. There was relief at the prospect of financial stability for his family. But most of all, there was gratitude for the lesson in humility and grace that a 10-year-old prince had taught him. On his last day of work, Marcus was assigned to one final patrol of the palace gardens. As he walked the familiar paths, he thought about all the moments that had led to this decision. Near the spot where the charity event had taken place, he encountered Prince George one last time. "Mr. Thompson," the young prince said with a smile, "I heard that James joined his football team. How is he doing?" "He's doing wonderfully, Your Highness," Marcus replied with genuine happiness. "He scored his first goal last week. He wanted me to tell you thank you, and that he thinks about your kindness every time he plays." Prince George's face lit up with joy. "That makes me so happy. Will you tell him that I hope he keeps scoring lots of goals?" "I will, Your Highness. And I want you to know that your kindness taught me something very important about accepting help and putting family first. You helped me become a better father." As Marcus walked away from the palace for the last time, he felt at peace with his decision. He had learned that true strength sometimes means admitting you need help, that pride should never come before family, and that kindness can come from the most unexpected sources. Prince George's simple act of generosity had not only helped James join his football team, it had helped Marcus find a new path toward providing the life his family deserved. The football kit still hung in James's room, carefully maintained and treasured not just as sports equipment, but as a reminder that sometimes the smallest gestures can change everything. And Marcus carried with him the lesson that accepting help with grace and gratitude is not a sign of weakness, but a recognition of the bonds that connect all people in their shared struggles and shared hopes for a better life.